On the corner of two long-lost highways in Wyoming's Sweetwater County lies the Corner Keg. Tourist maps do not include it. The old wooden sign outside is nearly unreadable, and the gravel parking lot rarely sees more than 5 or 6 cars, most of which are pickup trucks bearing Wyoming license plates, with the rare exception of an out-of-state sedan that got lost. Here I had worked as a bartender for over 10 years. Staying for thus long wasn't in my original goal, but hey, aims change. Occasionally they adapt in response to opportunities, and other times they do so out of sheer need. It was very different for me. Before I had even completed the employee application, the former owner, Harris Reed, slipped a folded piece of paper across the bar to hire me. 5 regulations scribbled in a fading blue pen were found on it. His decades-long battle with alcohol and smokes had left him with a gravelly voice. But hey, these aren't suggestions. This is to ensure your survival. It made me laugh. That was not the case for him. I finally get it now. After 10 years, I know firsthand the consequences of disobeying these regulations. It's been my job to tidy up after things have happened, and I still have the note that everyone else used folded up and stashed in my wallet. Now that I know why these restrictions are in place, I'll tell you about them. If you happen to be in this area of Wyoming and happen upon the weathered sign for the Corner Keg, you might want to remember them even if you think it's all a coincidence or that I'm crazy. No one is ever allowed to sit in the corner booth after 10 p.m. on Thursdays. No big deal, that booth on the corner by the Corner Keg. Tables covered in cigarette burns, cracked red vinyl seats and carved initials of long-gone customers. All it is during the day is an additional place to sit. However, that booth is deserted every Thursday night after 10 o'clock. It was not necessarily the case. Until the 3rd Thursday of my employment, I sat folks down without thinking twice when I initially started. In late October, the wind would rip straight through you, bringing with it the biting cold that Wyoming experiences just before snowfall. A quartet of university students were making a pit stop en route to a camping excursion. The 2 males and 2 females were intoxicated but otherwise harmless, and they were somewhat rowdy. Unlike any night before the bar was packed, I sent the college students in the direction of the corner booth because most of the usual tables were already taken, because a group of pipeline workers had gotten paid. Time was between 10:17 o'clock. Although he shook his head discreetly, Harris finally met my gaze from across the room. However, by then it was too late. A slew of students had already jumped in, placing orders for shots and drinks. Things appeared to be going swimmingly for the first half an hour. They drank, laughed a bit too loudly, and every so often stood up to play a song on the jukebox, which magically still had some juice. At about 11:30 p.m., I caught sight of a girl, Mackenzie. A small blonde, couldn't help but watch the wall behind the booth from her side. I first assumed she had seen a bug, like a spider. While the Corner Keg has a less than stellar reputation for cleanliness, nothing was present other than the wood-paneled wall adorned with a weathered print of the Grand Tetons. Mackenzie started acting more and more erratically as the night went on. She became disengaged from the discussion. When her friends attempted to talk to her, she would only say one word and stare blankly at the wall. By midnight, she had completely stopped talking. Connor, one of the men, appeared to realize something was off at last. He leaned in close enough to murmur something into her ear as he draped one arm over her shoulders. His words sent shivers down her spine. She forcefully threw him aside, causing him to fall on the floor. With an unusually flat voice, she stated that they won't quit staring. Everyone was gazing. Her companions looked at each other anxiously. According to the other girl, Mac, there isn't anybody around. It might be best if we return to town and reconsider going camping if it starts to rain. She spoke, but Mackenzie seemed oblivious. Now she was leaning against the wall, her fingers moving across the wood paneling in a rhythm that seemed to follow invisible lines. Plenty of people all waiting and watching. Connor rose to his feet, visibly mortified and irritated. He mentioned to nobody in particular that she hasn't slept in almost 2 days due to midterms. In addition, she took some Adderall She's passing out, but that's okay. He limped forward to take her arm. Mac, I think we should go. What followed occurred so rapidly that when it came time to make statements, we couldn't even agree on the order in which things occurred. Mackenzie reached across the table and took a steak knife. Connor sprang at her. A brawl broke out, followed by a scream. Connor found himself again on the floor, but this time he was holding a knife embedded in his neck, slightly below his jaw. As blood spurted from her injured artery, it pelted the nearby wall table and stunned classmates. Standing over him, Mackenzie stood expressionless in her sweatshirt drenched in red. They instructed me to. Their wait had been lengthy. Connor had already started bleeding on the slick linoleum floor when the town sheriff showed up. Once they got Mackenzie bound, she made no attempt to free herself. She maintained a fixed gaze on the wall throughout, occasionally nodding as if engaged in a conversation with an unseen companion. Mackenzie had a psychotic episode brought on by amphetamine misuse and lack of sleep. According to the official report, a mental evaluation took place at the Wyoming State Hospital in Evanston, where she was confined. It took 3 weeks before her body was discovered in her room dangling from a bedsheet. The orderly who discovered her swears that the words, "They're here too," were scrawled in her own blood on the wall. After the pub reopened, Harris reserved the corner booth with a handwritten sign that he would set out every Thursday at exactly 10 o'clock. His response was vague when I eventually inquired as to why. He added that the place where the booth is located was the site of the 1888 hanging of 7 men. The judge would read the sentencing every Thursday at 10 o'clock. Their reasoning was that he enjoyed it would have dinner first, and then make them wait. I dismissed him as a mere local caller trying to downplay the gravity of the situation. However, my insatiable curiosity led me to genuinely search for the meaning of his words. Every Thursday at exactly 10 o'clock, the judge he had mentioned, Judge Fleming, would convene court with the express purpose of handing out death sentences. He was known for his extraordinarily severe punishments, including the death penalty for persons convicted of relatively minor offenses like livestock rustling and small-time thievery. Worryingly, the corner keg used to be the exact location of a sentencing for 7 guys. The bar was constructed using part of the salvaged materials from the courthouse, which had burned down in 1926. Never again has anyone sat in that booth after 10 o'clock on Thursdays. I still don't know if Mackenzie's experience was a tragic example of mental illness or if she actually saw the spirits of the condemned men. Principle No. 2. Before you bring out the prospector's special, make sure the customer has clean teeth, turn them all down, and give Vaughan a call if they're gold. I had no clue who Vaughan was or why anybody's dental work should determine the may be served when I first saw this rule. I thought the prospector's special was some obscure local drink. No one placed an order for it until after 3 months had passed. A few of regulars were playing cards in the back, and there was an off-duty waitress enjoying a beer at the counter when he arrived on a Tuesday afternoon when the bar was practically deserted. Even though it was summer, the stranger, who was tall and skinny, was wearing a denim jacket underneath a sweat-stained trucker cap. His unruly grey hair sprang out. His movements were the only thing that stood out about him, almost wary, as if he were going to place his weight on each floorboard, only after carefully inspecting it. He sat down at the bar's far end, away from the crowd. "So what's your wish?" I put down a napkin and asked. In contrast to his otherwise aged appearance, the man's smile exposed a row of pristine white teeth that were incredibly straight. He spoke in an unexpectedly mild and sophisticated voice, calling it the prospector's special. Recalling the rule caused me to freeze. His grin persisted, and I couldn't help but fix my gaze on his pearly whites. "Is there an issue?" With an unwavering smile, he inquired. "Nope, I'm simply attempting to recall the ingredients. What I did was make do. It's been some time since anyone placed an order for it. I required a clearer view of his teeth. Did any of them have a golden hue?" The bar's low lighting made it difficult to discern. "Apologies. Shall I retrieve the recipe from the back? This is what I proposed. Can I get you a glass of water while we wait?" "What a fantastic idea," he said. I wanted to encourage him to drink something substantial, so I did something we rarely do. I filled a glass with ice water and a lemon wedge. I went back and set the bowl of water down in front of him. "Allow me a moment with that beverage. Here it is for you." He accepted the glass and took a long sip, just as I had anticipated. A gleam of golden light emanating from a tooth on the left side of his mouth caught my eye as he placed it down. I felt my pulse quicken. I had no clue who Vaughn was or even how to get in touch with him. I was afraid the stranger could overhear my call, since Harris was off that day. In fact, I stated while attempting to maintain a steady voice, "We are now missing one ingredient for the prospector's special, which I just realized. What else could pique your interest?" Almost instantly, the man's grin faded. "No changes," he stated curtly. "You have everything that is required. I am sure of it." "Apologies, but that's not the case. Embracing honesty is key." He abruptly halted his elegant delivery, abruptly adopting a more aggressive tone. Its rich, ready aroma wafts up from beneath us. The bar's door flung wide, and a stocky man in his 60s strode in before I could answer. He looked over the room with military accuracy, and his leathery skin betrayed his decades of sun exposure in Wyoming. His eyes were icy blue. Someone unfamiliar at the bar's counter, his voice had lost all trace of refinement when he called Vaughn. "Miller, is that you?" The stranger nodded in response. "Far from home you are." You could feel the tension building up between them. The off-duty waitress discreetly collected her belongings and made her escape. The card players at the back paused their game and observed with caution. I stopped in for a drink, since according to Miller, the stranger thought I was simply passing through. Vaughn asserted that this was not your domain. We were in a contract. Miller's grin reappeared, but this time it was unfriendly. Deals may and do change, particularly when fresh information emerges. According to Vaughn, there is nothing here that you need. Put this behind you. Miller might quarrel or something worse could happen. I thought for a second. As I watched him, I caught a glimpse of something metallic in his jacket pocket. There was a nervous pause, and then he stood up. He mentioned another occasion. He spoke up in a voice that was audible to me as he went by, "Vaughn, old man, you can't have it both ways." Upon his departure, Vaughn assumed the seat that Miller had relinquished American whiskey. 2 times as much. My fingers was slightly trembling when I poured it. "Tell me about the prospector's special and who that was." Vaughn took a few swigs of the whiskey before responding. "Before the mines near Atlantic City closed in the 1970s, Cooper Miller worked them. He is currently alone, prospecting for the value of gold. With the guideline about the inspection of gold teeth in mind, I inquired. Vaughn had a glum look on his face. Something greater in worth and risk, simultaneously. He rose up after finishing his drink. "Feel free to give me a ring as soon as he returns, or someone else places an order for that beverage." On a napkin, he scrawled a number, any time of day. In the years that followed, 6 additional individuals placed orders for the prospector's special. I would phone Vaughn every time I noticed a gold tooth when I examined their teeth, and he would always show just minutes later, as if he had been waiting nearby. Years after our initial meeting, a hiker discovered Cooper Miller's corpse in a deserted mine shaft, approximately 15 miles from the corner keg. I was never told what they were prospecting for. The news said that he had a slit across his neck and had multiple teeth pulled, one of which was that golden molar. I was sure of it. It was funny that the coroner thought he had been dead for at least 2 years. I thought I'd seen him in the bar a month ago trying to order the prospector's special, and flashing that same gold teeth again. Vaughn merely nodded and remarked, "The longer they dig, the more similar they look," and in response to my mentioning this to him, without seeking clarification, I proceeded, "You don't need to know some answers. Never let Tracy Loreen run a tab. That's rule number 3. Payment must be made in cash, and all glasses must be retrieved promptly, as she finishes one April night during a storm." Tracy Loreen made her debut appearance at the corner keg. We had to rely on gas lanterns and candles to get things done since half of the county lost power. Her crimson hair shimmered like copper in the lantern light as she approached, lonesomely, rain rattling from a dark umbrella. She wasn't from the area. She wasn't quite a tourist, but her city clothes and the keys to her rental automobile made it clear she seemed to be looking for someone as she purposefully scanned the room, her emerald eyes fixating on each customer. "Gin and tonic," she remarked, as I drew near. "If you happen to have Hendrix on hand, please do," while most clients bought beer or well whiskey. We did keep it on hand just in case I could feel her evaluating me as I made her drink. She took a moment to look at the glass I had placed in front of her. $100, on the other hand, she set on the bar. "I would like to open a tab," she instructed. The third rule sprang to me. "Apologies, but we only accept payment for each drink." In her eyes a sudden light appeared, maybe even suspicion or annoyance. What a strangely limited policy for a bar to have. I apologized and shrugged my shoulders, explaining that the owner's policy applies in particular during power outages when the credit card machine is not working. Despite her obvious lack of belief, she nodded and inched the 100 closer to us. For the time being, retain the transformation. I paid for her drink and placed a large portion of the change in a tip glass that was placed beside her. I remarked, "That was quite kind. It is my sincere wish that it purchases some data." Honesty was her response. "What data type is this?" while sipping her gin and tonic. Tracy kept her emerald gaze fixed on me. "My husband, Kevin Lorraine, is the man I am trying to find." She pulled out a picture from her purse, standing tall with sandy hair and a beard. He grinned as a national park seemed to loom in the distance. This location was part of his research expedition. No one has heard from him in the 3 days since he was due to update his team. Even after looking closely at the picture, I couldn't place the man. I apologize for the inconvenience, but he has not been in here while I have been working. Just when are you off the clock? "Excuse me," she inquired. "Choose Mondays and Tuesdays. Harris performs those duties." While putting the picture back in its place, she gave a little nod. "Tomorrow I will return to ask him." After Tracy drank her drink, she placed an order for another. Quickly gathering her empty glass and wiping off the bar where it had been, I followed the instruction. An eyebrow was arched by her, thorough. Although cleanliness had never been the corner keg's strong point, I did say that we did our best to keep the place clean. She perched herself on the bar stool and watched the other customers for 3 more drinks. Even though a few of the regulars gave her interested looks, no one came up to her. At our establishment, it was unusual to see a beautiful woman dressed so well. I wasted no time in retrieving her last glass. As soon as she departed, I found something peculiar while I was wiping it. Strangely thick for gin or tonic. There's a slight scarlet residue inside. I took a careful whiff of it. I thought of pennies when I smelled its metallic aroma. Blood Tracy had already left when I turned to the door. She was walking to her rental car with her black umbrella bobbing in the rain. She came back the following night as Harris was tending bar. Even though I was at the back replenishing supplies, I overheard them talking. Harris mentioned Kevin Lorraine. Indeed, he was here approximately 7 days ago, frequently questioned the bartender about the history of the nearby mines. Has he mentioned his lodging arrangements? "What do you think?" Tracy queried. He did in fact say that he had camped out close to Fallen Horse Creek. He claimed his goal was to study the geological formations located at that altitude. Harris and I were both aware that the corner keg had not been visited by a sandy-haired geologist recently, and this knowledge caused me to freeze. Whether they were known by name or not, we knew every consumer. I didn't get why Harris was being dishonest. For a whole week, Tracy came back every night to have her gin and tonics. Every time I promptly took her glasses and discovered the same reddish residue. On her 8th visit, she was unusually tardy. Arriving close to midnight, Harris and I were the only ones in the pub. Our doors were going to shut before we hit the road. One last drink, I saw her hands as I was making it. Dark stains, the same reddish-brown as the residue in her glasses, were visible under her fingernails, which I hadn't noticed previously in the poor light. After bringing her drink, I went to the far end of the bar to hide from Harris, who was tallying up the day's earnings. You lied to her about her husband. For what reason? Shh, I whispered. Harris cast a quick peek at Tracy, who appeared absorbed in her thoughts as she stared into her glass. Reason being 12 years ago, Kevin Loreen tragically passed away in a mining accident in Colorado, he whispered. His name was in the papers, and I knew who he was. No matter what she's seeking, it's not her spouse. I felt a shiver go down my back. Tracy caught my gaze once more. At this point, she was staring at us with a subtle smile on her face, as if she could hear us clearly, despite the distance. Standing up to depart, she drank her drink, swallowed, and dropped a $20 bill on the bar. Was your husband ever located? I couldn't resist asking. At the door, Tracy stopped. Oh, I found it, she said. Kevin always seemed to vanish into his job, but there are always traces left behind, and I am an expert at finding them. I took her glass when she departed. There was something new this time, and the residue was heavier than before. At the base of the glass is a little hard item. I used a napkin to retrieve it, a human molar. The tooth was still visibly bloodied at the base. Near Fallen Horse Creek, a man's corpse was discovered 3 days subsequently. His murder followed a lengthy period of torture. As reported in the newspaper, his life was cut short due to the extraction of many teeth. Authorities identified him as Dr. Lawrence Keller, a geologist from the University of Colorado, based on personal things discovered at his adjacent campground. His hands had been removed, likely to avoid fingerprint identification. Kevin Loreen does not appear anywhere. Harris gave me a glum nod as I showed him the news piece. He confirmed that continuing from where he had left off, Keller was drawing on Loreen's findings. What was left behind? Excuse me, I inquired. Harris had a gloomy look on his face. There are some things that are better kept hidden. Even though Tracy Loreen never went back to the corner, Keg Rule 3 is still in effect, because she occasionally sends people there. Gentlemen and women alike who have impeccable manners continuously order gin and tonics and seem to be stalking other customers. Fourth regulation. Tell the old wall phone operator, All Souls, 5 minutes, whenever it calls. If the caller wants to talk about the lost child, you should hang up right away. Mounted beside the restrooms is the wall phone, in issue an antique rotary phone. It hasn't been linked to any line for decades. I can't help but feel uneasy every time it rings because of it. I almost spilled a tray of glasses the first time I heard it. I had been working at the corner keg for around 3 months when it happened on a Tuesday afternoon. 2 old men playing checkers by the window were the only ones in the pub. That high-pitched, relentless ring of a vintage phone was instantly recognizable. Anticipating the presence of a mobile phone, I pivoted toward the origin of the din. The old wall phone, on the other hand, seemed to tremble a little with every ring. Harris came rushing out of the back room, strode straight to the phone, and whipped out the receiver before I could even register what was happening. Everyone, 5 minutes, he stated emphatically, before taking a brief pause to listen before ending the call. He saw me looking at him. His nonchalant tone betrayed his lack of concern for the gravity of the situation. He carelessly mentioned the wrong number. A month later, it occurred again. During the quiet period between lunch and dinner, I found myself alone at the bar. I recollected the rule and cautiously approached it as the phone rang. When I put the plastic receiver to my ear, it felt abnormally chilly. 5 minutes, I said, attempting to sound as casual as Harris. On the opposite side, there was complete quiet before what sounded like running water. At long last, an anonymous voice, no longer being identified, asked, "Is this regarding the kid that went missing?" It shivered through me. I pounded the receiver down without giving it any thought. Just as quickly the phone went off again. I remained silent. I informed Harris about what had transpired when he came for his shift an hour afterwards. His normally stern expression softened by what appeared to be real relief, as he told you that you were right. This is not a call we would like to field if they inquire about the missing youngster. Guess who it is, and which kid went missing? Excuse me, I inquired. While he was busy examining the booze inventory, Harris looked away from me. In the end, he explained that it's just a relic from a time before cell phones, when locals had to get their messages out more rapidly. All Souls meant an emergency in code. It would be 5 minutes before assistance would be sent. Although it was incomplete, it was the only information he could provide me on that particular day. The number has probably rang 20-odd times over the years. This is the typical format for most calls. I respond with the necessary expression. After a short pause, during which you may hear some ambient noise, the caller abruptly ends the call. 3 times recently, though the caller has been inquired about the missing child. As is customary, I have hung up the phone right away, every time. Last winter, during a blizzard, the corner keg was one of the only spots with power because of our backup generator. Yet the most distressing thing happened during that time. A family consisting of parents and 2 little children sought sanctuary with us when their vehicle became stuck in the ditch. A little girl of around 8 years old and a boy of about 10 years old were occupying themselves with a bottle cap game of checkers as their parents gathered around our antiquated space heater. Nobody was moving until the plows passed through, even though it was almost midnight. Then the wall phone started ringing. Astonished, the father glanced up. "I hope you're not too worried about being open during this storm." I put on an act of friendliness, I would say. So, after that, I went over to the phone and took the necessary calls. Everyone only 5 minutes. Never before had the other party's voice been so audible. The missing child was located. Now she is here with us. The small girl standing by the checkerboard abruptly stood up, her head cocked as if listening to something, just as I was about to end the call. "Emma!" exclaimed the mother. "Oh my, what is it?" The young woman remained silent. On the contrary, she swung her head gently toward the wall phone while staring at the receiver I was holding. The sound of her flat voice made me feel uneasy, and she informed me that they were requesting my presence. Looking worried, her parents exchanged glances. "No one's requesting your services. Please come and sit down," her father urged Emma, though moved closer to the phone and then closer still. She emphasized that she must respond. We were located. The harm was done even though I hung up swiftly. With a growing sense of purpose, Emma started making her way toward the phone. She scratched her father's cheek with an unexpected intensity, drying blood as he attempted to stop her. She writhed and screamed so violently that it took both of her parents to calm her down. My turn to respond. "We were located. I must depart." After being in the rear, Harris came out when there was a ruckus. He glanced over the scene and then hurriedly withdrew a little metal tin that was completely foreign to me from behind the bar. He withdrew what appeared to be a grain of rock salt from it, then approached. The writhing kid placed it in her hand and closed her fingers over it. There was an immediate change. As she collapsed into her parents' arms, Emma's eyelids rolled back for an instant before she blinked and stared around, bewildered. "Why does everyone seem to be staring at me?" With a return to her usual voice, she inquired. Was I asleep? Her folks couldn't even muster a word of shock. In no time at all, Harris had the issue under control. He gently informed Emma that she was sleepwalking a little. When someone are exhausted after a lengthy journey, this can occur. Harris was dragged aside by Emma's father as her mother escorted her to the washroom. Their words went unheard by me, but I could see the man's face turning whiter by the second. His gaze betrayed a mix of dread and protective affection as he kept staring at his daughter upon her return. The family promptly departed the following morning, upon the roads being made clear. Before they left, I overheard Emma say, "Mommy, how did that woman over the phone know my middle name, Alma, meaning soul in Latin, was her middle name, which I found out later. After they went, Harris finally gave me the whole tale. A young child supposedly vanished during a severe winter in the early 1900s, according to urban legend. After days of searching, nobody in the town came up empty-handed. The parents sought the advice of a solitary hill woman, famed for her extraordinary talents in their hour of crisis. In different parts of the county, the woman installed a system that consisted of a network of specially treated phones. There may be ways for each phone to communicate with the others outside of the usual lines, but the legend doesn't say how. In order to coordinate their efforts, the search teams would use these phones, which would constantly start conversations with all souls in an effort to evoke protection from whatever was out there. Although the child was never located, there were instances when the phone continued to ring, suggesting that whomever or whatever abducted the child so long ago may still be seeking additional victims. The child who went missing is no longer identified, according to Harris. They're targeting any kid they can get in touch with, hoping for an answer. I will never speak to a caller again who wants to know about the missing child. I don't know if I believe in such things, but I do know what happened that night with Emma. It is wise to cut ties with some people. Number 5. Rule. Pretend normally while setting a salt shaker on its side on the table. If you observe that a customer's reflection is acting differently than the customer, patiently await the arrival of Dev Harris or the sheriff. When I initially saw this rule, I thought it was the most ridiculous. Likenesses of people don't behave autonomously, not in real life, but in terrifying movies. Clayton Renner was the next person I met. On a leisurely July Sunday, as the sun was setting in a riot of orange and purple hues, he rolled in. Nothing out of the ordinary about him: average height, average physique, short brown hair, aside from the paleness of his skin, which betrayed an indoor person. With a beer in hand, he settled into a seat at the bar. Nothing out of the ordinary about it, but while tending to his needs, I couldn't help but steal a quick glimpse at the mirror, the long, somewhat spotted rectangle that runs the length of the counter behind the bar. It was Clayton's mirror, not Clayton himself, that was staring at me. The bowl of peanuts I set out for him captivated his attention, but I felt a chill run down my spine as his reflection tracked my every move in the mirror. The glass I was using for polishing almost fell to the floor. Clayton appeared clueless as he continued to sip his beer by the time my gaze returned to him squarely. Now his reflection was an exact replica of his actions. Was it all in my head? Possibly, I suppose. This room is known for its terrible lighting, and the mirror is old and distorted in spots from dampness and age. However, it occurred once again. 10 minutes after that, Clayton sat with his head lowered and his fingers navigating through his phone. His reflection in the mirror seemed to be whispering to an old couple in the corner booth as it stared at them intently. The rule about turning the salt shaker upside down remained in my memory, but my reasoning brain continued to fight against what it was seeing. A reasonable justification was required. After a string of strange encounters and late hours, my imagination has run wild, and this could all be just a lighting illusion. After Clayton drank all of his beer, he placed another order. I kept my gaze fixed on him while I served it, ignoring the mirror. He asked how business was going, and made casual conversation about the weather, so he seemed like a nice enough guy. He gestured around the bar and claimed he wouldn't have much to do tonight. The majority of the time, Sundays are rather calm, I said. The locals start their day with church, then spend the afternoon catching up on sleep, and then spend the night at home. He chuckled like any other person. What about guests? How common are those? Some, I said with caution. Most visitors are only passing through on their journey. Clayton gave a deep contemplative nod. Wow, where do you believe their destination is? They were all merely transitory. The inquiry seemed off. It was too intimate, too deep, and asked by an unknown individual. I distanced myself to attend to another client after making a non-committal noise. My second look at the mirror revealed that Clayton's reflection was vanished. In the real world, he was still sitting there with his beer in hand, but there was just an empty stool where he should have been reflected. I fumbled for a salt shaker, my hands quivering a little. Circling the bar, I cleaned up imagined spills until I reached Clayton, all the while keeping my actions casual. I set the salt shaker on its side on the bar, adjacent to his beer. When he looked at it with curiosity, I told him it brought good luck. Is that true? The smile he tried to muster never made it to his eyes. I've always thought it was unlucky to spill salt. I retorted, only if you spill it, before retreating. Once again, I sent a short message to Dev, who was occasionally helping out at the bar and was obviously Harris's nephew, fifth rule. Right now, for about 40 minutes, Clayton sipped on his second drink. During that time, his reflection kept acting wildly, perhaps whispering to someone just out of frame, sometimes completely disappearing, and other times glancing at other customers. I once witnessed Clayton's reflection in the mirror, standing up while he stayed, sitting in reality while I served a group at the other end of the bar. Leaning down as if to whisper in their ears, Clayton. The reflection strode behind the seated reflections of other customers. Customers began to rub their necks or shiver one by one as if they were experiencing a sudden draft. As soon as the door swung open and the sheriff entered, a wave of relief washed over me. Although he was dressed in civilian attire, denim and a flannel shirt, I could tell he was a soldier by the cautious way he scanned the room, his right hand lingering at his hip, the usual spot for his weapon to be holstered. When he locked eyes with me, I gave Clayton a little nod. He placed an order for a beer, and the sheriff sat down 2 seats down. For a few minutes, there was complete silence. They drank in, quiet, not looking at each other. After that, the sheriff stole a quick look at himself in the reflection. He tensed up for a second after whatever it was he saw. There wore him down. "Wow, I can't believe I've seen you around here before," he eventually told Clayton the other night. As he turned to face him, Clayton grinned warmly, casually, strolling by. "Excuse me, but could you just tell me where you're going?" When asked where the job is, Clayton gave an evasive response. "Could you tell me what kind of job it would be?" The bar's temperature dropped, what felt like a couple of degrees. Clayton's expression stayed the same, but he became more distant. "Collection. What individuals leave behind is what I collect." The sheriff gently gave a nod. "Do you agree with that? I find this field fascinating." "The things people give up on are surprising," Clayton added, his voice barely audible. "For the most part, they are themselves, things that are lost without their knowledge until the moment is past." Looking into the mirror, I could make out Clayton's figure advancing toward the sheriff's. A grin bigger than any human mouth should be able to achieve was visible on its stretched mouth. Not even the sheriff batted an eye. "You need to get out of here, in my opinion." Collectors are generally not well received in this area. Even while Clayton's demeanor stayed benign, he did have a twitching jaw. "My beer is still half drunk." "Oh, absolutely, I must say you have." After what seemed like an eternity of limbo, Clayton finally shrugged, tossed a 20 on the bar and got to his feet. He suggested trying again at a later time. Before leaving, he took one last look around the pub, fixing his eyes on a few customers. There is an abundance of possible buys here. As he made his way to the door, I couldn't resist taking one more look in the mirror. He was alone with Clayton's reflection. It stood at the bar, glaring at me with a twisted expression that betrayed its savage fury. Suddenly he disappeared, taking the reflection with him. Already on his feet, the sheriff ordered the door to be locked. As I turned the deadbolt, he flipped the sign to closed. "Would you tell me what I just saw?" "Just what was that I saw?" He was handcuffed by the sheriff. Despite being in his 50s, he suddenly appeared considerably older. Oh, their names vary among cultures. Metamorphoses reflected imitators, fetch spouses. I refer to them as collectors. Who are the collectors? Persons their life. I had set the salt shaker on the bar, and he gave it a quick look. The presence of salt causes them to desynchronize from their physical counterparts, causes the reflection to lag, and causes it to function autonomously. That is how we identify them. Clearly, the reflection in the mirror wasn't Clayton. No. The sheriff said, shaking his head, "In all likelihood, Clayton Renner does not exist. You needed both the physical and reflective forms to function properly. But what you saw in the mirror and in person were incompatible." The two were forced apart by the salt. Imagine for a second a world if you hadn't shown up. If all had gone according to plan, he would have located a weak spot, isolated it, and then replaced it. In the worst-case scenario, the sheriff motioned toward the crowded pub. His attempts may have been numerous. The number of times I've had to use Rule 5 has increased 7-fold over the years. Every time it was a new set of details, new names, faces and tales. On the other hand, they all had a few things in common, like a weird fascination with other customers, strange inquiries about passing through, and of course reflections that acted without supervision when Salt was around. I'm now better able to recognize them, the subtle discord between their facial expressions and their statements, the method they observe others as if committing details to memory, and the absolute silence they display when they believe no one is observing. They are thus presented to you. Here are the 5 guidelines that help me maintain order and efficiency at the corner keg. I don't see any reason to stop following them now. I've been a dedicated follower for almost a decade, through busy evenings and peaceful ones alike.